Awesome. So for domain 3 today, the content is actually not that much. Technically, we can finish all of this today, but I would hate to rush through all of this, okay? So what I'll do today is we'll cover the cost management in Azure. So cost management in Azure is going to include the factors that affect cost in Azure. I know we talked about cost a little bit in the beginning when we talked about consumption-based pricing model. But today we're going to talk about the factors that affect it, right? And we'll look at some tools that are being used, like the cost management and billing tool. We'll also look at tags. Tags are very useful in helping us manage our costs and keeping track of which cost center or which region or which project is, costing us less or more money. So 2 ways in which we can look at pricing on Azure. We can use a pricing calculator, or we can use the total cost of ownership. That all of this we'll talk about in the first part of our lecture today. And then in the second part of our lecture, we'll jump into governance and compliance. So this is just to make life easier for you because you don't want to go ahead and set up standards or set up policies for each one of your resources. You can have a blueprint just like your house blueprint. Once you have a blueprint, you can reuse it as many times as you need. The blueprint actually has policies, so we'll talk about policies as well. And a bunch of policies, a group of policies becomes an initiative. So a policy, for instance, could be creating a virtual machine to meet a particular configuration, so that the next time you want to create that virtual machine, you can just fire up that policy. Once you fire up that policy, it gets created on the fly with a snap of a finger, rather than you having to go through every single step you did the previous time. We'll also talk about resource locks, just to make sure that you don't mistakenly delete or change some of your resources. You can put a lock on it and change it whenever you need it. So at the end of the day, we are going to explore the Service Trust portal. So this is just a portal. A portal, again, is just a coming together area that Microsoft has developed to have all their standards and procedures on there, so that all those customers that are using Azure can explore it to see the different standards that are met when you keep your data or when you use Azure for all your business purposes. So it helps you to be able to stay compliant, and also when government requirements or whatever requirements you're looking at are met. So these two we're going to cover today: cost management and the tools and features of governance and compliance. Tomorrow, we'll round up with managing and deploying Azure resources, as well as describing how we are going to monitor Azure. Things like the Azure Advisor, Azure Health Services, Azure Monitor are going to be covered tomorrow. We'll also explore the Azure portal a little bit more. We'll look at the Cloud Shell, which includes Bash or Azure CLI and Azure PowerShell. And we'll talk about the purpose of Azure Arc as well as Azure Resource Manager. Like I said, not much left. By the end of this week, next week, you should be able to write your exam. Not just write your exam, you should be able to knock it off and knock it out of the park. But that said, what questions do you have? No questions. Well, let's dive in. So like I said, today we're going to have 2 parts. Part 1, we're going to talk about cost management. Okay, what does cost management entail? Before we continue, today is the 19th. So we'll have just about 1 week left, and that's fine. We're almost done with our content. We're going to practice and practice and practice. All right, what are we going to do today? We're going to look at cost management to begin with. So we'll get introduced to some of the impacts of cost, or some of the factors that impact cost, as well as predicting potential costs and monitoring and controlling costs. Like I said earlier, factors are going to be the first outcome that we need to get. Look at pricing calculator, as well as total cost of ownership, how the cost management tool works, and the purpose of tags. So let's dive in. First off, what are some of the factors that affect cost? We did mention that unlike on-premises, we don't have to spend a lot of money upfront. Unlike anything you want to do in life, you don't need some kind of capital to get into the business of hosting your own important information in your business. So operational cost is what we're going to focus on. And this operational cost could be the compute cost, the storage cost, or the networking cost, okay? So what are some of the things that affect it? It depends on the type of resource that you're trying to deploy. Some resources are more expensive, others are less expensive. It also depends on your consumption. If you keep requesting queries from the database, it's going to cost you more than if you have the database sitting without really using it. So the number of queries, the number of times that you hit a resource or you use, or how long your virtual machine is running is going to give you the total cost. Also maintenance, think about the network. Each time you're having queries going through the network and all these endpoints being accessed, it also counts on your cost. But you can go ahead and deploy a virtual machine in East US. The price is going to be totally different from deploying a virtual machine in Australia or Europe or Africa. So you have to be cognizant of that fact. It depends on where your business is. It depends on where your clients is. It depends on where your audience is. That's where you want to launch your virtual machine, for instance. The subscription type also lets you know the type of cost. So for right now, if you're signing up on Azure, I encourage you to take advantage of the free trial. With the free trial, you have free usage of whatever you're using. There are some that are going to be there for about 25 different services that are always going to be free, but the other ones are going to be free for the time being. Also, Azure has a marketplace, just like your cell phones have a place or market where you go and buy software. So in this marketplace, you have third-party companies that have created specialized solutions to meet a particular need. So if you needed a SQL database that does some kind of stuff for medical or similitude, maybe someone has already created a solution out there. You can go ahead and buy that or rent it, depending on how their model is set up. So that will be another way that your cost is going to be calculated. All right. But it depends on the type. For instance, your storage, as you can see here, there is a blob storage. Blob storage again stands for binary large object. In this case, you can dump anything, any type of data in there, but it's going to depend on the tier. Is it going to be hot, meaning it's going to be frequently accessed data, or is it going to be cold, that is not frequently accessed? What type of replication are you looking at, or redundancy? If you're looking at it to be redundant over the region or over a zone, let's say availability zone, or just redundant within the data center, those all take into consideration. And where exactly are you deploying this? If you're deploying it in Africa or Europe or Southeast Asia and so on, the prices are always going to vary, probably slightly, in some cases more. And for virtual machines, it depends too. What type of virtual machine are you deploying? What's the operating system? Is it a free operating system, or is it the ones that need a license? What kind of software do you have on there? Is it a free software, or do you have to pay for it? Do you need a slower processor or a faster processor? The number of cores that you have in there to be able to run it simultaneously? The amount of storage, all of those are the things that affect the cost of Azure. Any questions so far? No questions. Let's carry on. Now that we've been able to see the different things that affect the cost, now it's always a good idea for you to be able to estimate, just for information purposes, to estimate the cost of you using Azure. So in this case, it gives you a cost on Azure. If you go to the portal, you should be able to click on the pricing calculator and you should see something like this. And it gives you some example scenarios that you can test out. And if you like what you see, you could save it. You can save your estimates, or you can go ahead and select each of those resources individually. So you can select a resource. Let's say if I need to launch something on the web, let's go ahead and check out how much will it cost me monthly, annually to be able to launch a website or a web app. And then go ahead and put that out there. If you need to build out a solution, in that case, the different pieces that are needed. Maybe the developer has reached out to you. I'm going to need this and that and that. So you look at those on here, add them up together, or just use an example scenario, and then you can modify it as need be. So for instance, you know that on your cloud, let's say on your on-premises, you have a virtual machine. That virtual machine actually utilizes an application gateway. This application gateway helps you to be able to balance the load, right? Just like a load balancer. So if you have more requests coming from the internet, you can go ahead and direct it to whichever machine that has the capacity or capability to do it. And if you know you're going to be storing a bunch of data, maybe you need an Azure SQL database. Now you can go ahead and build an estimate on that workload by using this pricing calculator and present it to your team lead or your manager and tell them, this is what I think it will cost us to do it on the cloud. So like I said, only for estimation purposes. Obviously, it's going to change a bit. The second one So we need to remember the differences between the two. The second tool is total cost of ownership. Total cost of ownership just helps you compare what you have on premises and what you can have on the cloud. So for instance, let's say you know that if you go to the market to buy spices and all whatnot that you need to cook at home, it's going to cost you this sum of money. That's if you buy all the spices, buy all the ingredients, using your gas to travel and so on. But then you also have a cloud cost, which will be, for instance, if you just order it from a restaurant. If I go ahead and just order food from a restaurant, it's probably going to cost me $10 to order a pizza. But if I have to make the pizza myself, I'll have to, regardless of the time that I spend, I'm going to have to buy the dough, buy the eggs, buy the sugar, mix it up, come up with a mixture, and so on and so forth, get whatever toppings I need. You know, it's a lot of things that have to be put in place, and there's still no guarantee that the pizza is going to be good, right? So that's an example of doing everything on premises, buying all the different ingredients, following a recipe to be able to make your pizza, or just calling for pizza to be delivered to you, or just driving up to the store and you don't have to wash any plates, right? You just go straight to the pizza joint, order your pizza, eat, and leave without bothering about washing any dishes or, cleaning after yourself. Sounds good? So with total cost of ownership, you have your current infrastructure that's configured. You present that current infrastructure, defining the workloads, make any assumptions that you might need, and then view the report. And it looks at it side by side and say, hey, it's going to be this much that you're going to be saving if you decide on moving your on-premises infrastructure or on-premises project to the cloud using the same requirements. Obviously, you can adjust the requirements to see what changes need to be made for it to be able to break even with what you currently have on premises. All right. So comparing workloads and their cost using total cost of ownership. All right. So don't get those two confused. Pricing calculator gives you the price of each resource or a bunch of resources or a scenario. Total cost of ownership compares on premises versus cloud. All right, next up is our cost management tool. So a billing tool is present on our homepage, very, very useful because it helps you to quickly check your resources and their costs. With that speed, you can be able to test a new feature, or you can track that, hey, you're going to end up, your accumulated cost is going to get so high. Maybe you have launched something accidentally. Now you can go back and fix it, okay? So some of the key benefits, it helps you to quickly check your cost, the cost that you've had so far and the projected cost. It helps you to also create alerts. You can say, hey, if my cost is getting more than 20K or 30K, go ahead and alert me. I'll have to go in and check and see what's causing the cost to increase. And then you can adjust it as needed. If you have a particular budget, you can set an alert for that budget. If you know that you're using the free credit, because you usually get free credits when you create an account, you just want them to notify you once you're getting out of your capacity of your free credit. You can set that alert as well, or you can set the alert based on quotas. So you might decide that you want this IT department to not spend more than $10,000, and you want the sales department to not spend more than $20,000. So you can set up those different targets for each of those quotas. Finally, it can help you to create a budget. Budget is always good to take a look at that. So on here, you can see there's a cost management, and there's a subcategory under cost management, which is cost analysis. It helps you to do an analysis, which is what you're looking at right now, on each service, each location, and so on and so forth. You can break it down by a particular scope, a particular timeline as you need, okay? So as you can see, cost analysis, cost alerts, budgets are all easy for you to access and break down those numbers. So that said, it is a good idea for us to use tags. Tags help us a lot to organize our content, organize our organization. How do you do that? It presents you with extra information like metadata about each resource. So we have policies that we'll talk about shortly that you can use to enforce these tags, to say when I create this, add a tag to this. Every time I create a virtual machine by this person, add a tag to it. And these tags, again, they are not inherited. Unlike other things like the privileges that are inherited, the tags are only for the particular resource. If you need, you have to tag each resource individually. So why would we use tags? We use it to maybe tag a resource management. In this case, you want to show if the resource is for a business unit or for a particular environment. Maybe we want to tag it for cost management. We want to be able to optimize that, or just to show if it's critical to our business in terms of operations. And depending on security as well, when you launch a resource, you say, hey, I think this is confidential. I don't need public access to it, and so on and so forth. It's very useful when you cannot get everything to fit in your resource groups, subscription, management groups, and so on. Okay, but here are some examples you'd see. Maybe an app name can be used for the resource, where it actually just shows you that any application that has that app name is tied to a particular application, or any resource that has that app name. You can also tie it to a particular cost center. When you work for a big organization, you want to be able to track every department spending. So you can say this cost center is auditing, this cost center is IT, that cost center is sales, and so on. It depends on the owner. If you know there's actually a person or maybe a contact person that you want to tag on there, you can go ahead and do that. So you want to track everybody's expenses based on a particular person or owner, you can just click on the tag and then look at the cost analysis. Environment is also a good way to break it down. In this case, you get to see if it's for the development environment, if it's just used for testing. Obviously, you want to make sure you keep track of that. Like, how come my testing cost is going too high, but my development cost is staying the same? So you know that the developers are probably not working, but the quality engineers and quality analysts are working a lot more because they're using that. So depending on what stage of the software development lifecycle you're on, then you would notice the changes and track them accordingly. Also, depending on the impact, you can always go ahead and tag a resource to say this is a mission critical resource. Then you probably want to set a policy to say, if this resource is running out of bandwidth, please increase it. But if it's a low priority resource, then if it's running out of bandwidth, just send an alert or a notification, and then you can manually update that. But for the mission critical, you probably want it to be elastic and not manual. Sounds good? So as you can see, that was very quick. We were able to touch everything that we needed to touch for cost management. Okay, so quick quote from Steve Jobs: it's not a faith in technology, it's faith in people. So when you have faith in people, you can actually know that the job is being done. And that takes us to our second part, which is compliance and governance. Talking about faith in people, right? You have to make sure that you have faith in them, that they comply, because the computer, the cloud computing, is only going to do what we set it up to do. All right. So quick question before we dive into the second part. Everything crystal clear?
That cost management chapter, our brain is not absorbing anything.
Your brain is not absorbing the cost management.
But yeah, but I'll go back and watch the video. Don't worry.
Okay. So yeah, let's see if I can try an example here. Let's try to do a quick demo of the portal. So let me go ahead and get into the portal again. Sign in, and I would use this one. I can't remember if that's the right one. I always get confused. So in here, you can see my subscriptions and so on and so forth. And let's say navigate subscriptions. In the subscriptions, you can see I have one subscription. If I click in there, you can see an overview of that subscription. On here is the cost management area. Okay, so I can probably click on cost analysis. It's going to break down the total cost so far and the estimated cost. So it's still doing the calculations. As you can see, it's telling me my actual cost is less than $3. It's forecasting that I'm going to spend $4 more, and that is for a monthly. Okay, so I can change the scope. This is for, I have just one subscription, but if I had another subscription, I could go in here, click on that, and change the scope to either myself or another subscription. But I don't have another subscription, so I can't change to that. But within the subscription, I have different resource groups. I have a resource group for Shell Cloud Storage in Western Europe. I have a subscription group for AZ 2023 January. I think this is where the server is. So I can click on that, select that, and it will give me a different scope. So that's what we mean by the different scopes in which you can check your cost management. So that now is giving me what has been done for that particular scope. Again, I'm viewing accumulated cost. I can also look cost by resource. If I click cost by resource, it's going to break down the different resources within this scope. So these are the resources I have. I have the AdventureWorks database, which is in that SQL Server, and I also have that storage account. That storage account, as you can see, does not cost me anything right now. Nothing has been done in it, but all the cost I'm incurring is from my database. So there's a total breakdown of all of this on the fly very quickly, rather than you having to wait for your finance department to punch in some numbers and come up with an estimate. So you can also view it by resource and invoice details, daily cost, and so on and so forth. You can change the date to look at whether than the last month, maybe 7 days, or the first quarter, and so on and so forth. So if you look at the first quarter, you probably have a different breakdown. Does that help a little bit?
At least that one, yes, a little bit clear.
Yeah, so that's the first thing again with the cost management. And you can set up alerts. I can go ahead and, set up different alerts that I need. One here, you have cost alerts. I can decide to add an alert and say, hey, when it reaches this particular amount, don't go ahead or go ahead and do this and so on and so forth. So I'll give the alert a name, the period that I want to look at, a date and so on, and set a particular amount for that budget threshold. When I reach that threshold, then something has to be done about it. So let's go ahead and say a threshold of $20. And you can see it has put my threshold on there. And I don't have any filter. That's okay. Let's say budget one is the name. Very last work period. Let's see if I put it at 15, that might be more feasible. Okay. Because it's hoping that by May it's going to go up. Currently, it's already down. So that looks good. Everything looks good. Go on to next. Now it's going to send me an email once I'm getting to that level. So at least one alert threshold percentage is required. And alert conditions, actual, the budget is at 80%. Action, none. That looks good. And language is default. Everything looks good. Yep. And now I'm going to get a notification, or I can go ahead and manage an action, create a budget, set alerts, and I should be good. So now it's validating. Next time, if a lot of people start hitting that database and they're using the database, I'm going to get an alert once the spending amount actually exceeds what I'm looking at. Sounds good? So that's an example of how you can set up your budgets and so on and so forth.